Parents abandoned me for golden children. Years later, as a multimillionaire, they want me to fund their kids' education. Be me. Been sitting on this story for months now. Finally need to get it off my chest. Been eating away at me for too long. Have to start from the beginning, because context matters here. Be 32 years old, working in software development at big tech company. Been with them since graduation. Worked my ass off to get where I am. Still part of me looks back sometimes. Wonder what life could have been like. If my mom made different choices back then, she had me when she was 19. Bio dad wasn't in the picture at all. Don't even know much about him. From what mom told me later, she gave him the choice to stick around. He didn't even hesitate. Just bolted. No child support, no custody fights. Just disappeared completely. We ended up living in this tiny apartment, above my grandparents' garage in Minneapolis suburbs. Wasn't much, but it worked somehow. Grandparents basically carried us through that time. They helped her with me while she finished school. She was studying to get degree in occupational therapy. Had to juggle everything at once. School, work, raising me alone. Gotta give her credit for one thing. She didn't just sit around feeling sorry for herself. Being single mom and all, she worked really hard back then. Those early years weren't even that bad. Sure, money was tight as hell, but I was too young to really notice. Spent most of my time with grandparents, while mom worked her shifts or studied. My grandpa especially loved having me around. Think he did more for me than anyone else during those years. Mom would still make time for me when she could. Read me stories before bed. Took me to different parks around the city. Little things like that. Things changed when I was about 8. Mom met this guy named Robert at her clinic. He seemed all right at first. Had stable government job. Normal guy on paper. Remember mom saying how different he was, compared to other guys she dated before. They dated for a while. Got married when I was around 11. Robert wasn't exactly a bad guy, but he wasn't warm either. He was always polite, almost distant though. Wasn't mean to me or anything like that, but he didn't really try to connect. Treated me like I was just there. Like part of the furniture, you know? At first, nothing really changed. Still living with mom and now Robert. It was fine. Not great, but fine. Then little things started to shift. Mom started focusing more on Robert and their life together. Dinners became quieter. Less about me, more about them. Remember sitting there trying to join conversations, getting brushed aside like I wasn't even there. Didn't take it personally at first. Figured she was just excited about her new marriage, trying to make it work. But as time went on, became clear I was being pushed out of the picture completely. Tried harder to get their attention. Worked my ass off in school. Brought home good grades. Helped around house constantly. Anything to show I was worth noticing. Then when I was about 12, mom got pregnant. With twins. Everyone was thrilled. I was too at first. Imagined being cool older brother. Helping out with babies. Teaching them things. Being part of this new family. Even started babysitting for neighbors. To practice for when twins came. But as her pregnancy went on, mom's attitude toward me shifted even more. Like she didn't have time for me anymore. Everything became about the twins. Figured it was temporary. Thought once they were born, things would go back to normal. Twins came along. I basically vanished overnight. Get it. They're babies. Babies need constant care and attention. Wasn't expecting things to stay exactly same. But this was on a whole different level. Wasn't just about her being busy or being tired, which would have made sense. Felt like she stopped seeing me altogether. Family dinners became thing of past. She used to be one planning them, making effort for us to have time together, but now nothing. And it wasn't just about skipping dinners. All little things that made me feel connected to her just disappeared. Talking about our day, watching shows together, even those random inside jokes we used to have. Think worst part was how I kept trying. Even though clear I wasn't part of new family dynamic, still tried my hardest. Still worked hard in school. Helped out everywhere I could. Tried to make myself useful. But no matter what I did, it didn't matter. I wasn't priority anymore. By time I was 16, everything came to boiling point. Mom and Robert called me into living room. Said they needed serious conversation. Knew it wasn't going to be good. Could feel it in the air. They sat me down. Started explaining how things were tight financially. With twins and all. Said their expenses had gone up. Couldn't afford to support everyone in house anymore. Robert did most of talking. Laying out all numbers. Like I was supposed to feel bad for them. Mom just sat there looking at me. Then she said something I'll never forget. They deserve more. Not, we'll figure it out. Not, we're in this together. Just clear message that I was nothing to them. Didn't even argue. What was point? Went to my room, packed up what little I had. Clothes, few personal things. Walked outdoor. Didn't even look back. Went straight to grandparents' house. Grandparents didn't hesitate to take me in. But man, were they mad? Grandpa kept pacing around, muttering under his breath about how he couldn't believe his daughter would do this, while Grandma just shook her head and hugged me tightly. They wanted to confront Mom, but at the same time, didn't want to cut her off completely, mostly because of twins. And I got it. Twins were innocent in all this. They didn't ask to be born. Certainly didn't ask to become center of Mom's world. At my expense, couldn't blame them, even if I was angry at situation. That day was turning point for me. Day I realized couldn't rely on Mom anymore. At 16 wasn't just teenager trying to figure out life. Was on my own. It was scary, but didn't have choice. From that moment knew had to take care of myself, because no one else was going to do it. Living with grandparents was relief, but wasn't easy. They gave me roof over head, place to stay, but couldn't do much beyond that. They were retired, living on fixed income, just didn't have resources to support me. Way I needed, so started working. First job was at this local burger joint. Wasn't glamorous, but paid just enough for school supplies, clothes. Some stuff needed to get through high school. Balancing work and school wasn't simple though. Get home late, try to finish homework, wake up early next day, do it all over again. Grades slipped bit, but still managed to stay on track to graduate. What really stung was Mom didn't check in at all, like I'd ceased to exist for her. Every now and then, hear about her and Robert through family gossip. They were doing well, of course. Twins were thriving, living their picture-perfect life, in their nice house, with their new cars. Honestly, couldn't wrap head around it. Don't know why two people working decent jobs couldn't afford having 3 kids? I wasn't some extravagant expense, just needed basics. Meanwhile, I was one struggling, working weekends and late into school nights, just to keep myself afloat. Juggling homework, shifts, trying to have some semblance of normal life was exhausting. Wasn't like asking much from them. Just little effort, little care, but felt like second I walked out that door. They wiped their hands clean of me, went back to their perfect little bubble. Guess wasn't really about expenses. They just didn't want me anymore. Around senior year, college acceptance letters started rolling in. Was excited but also terrified. Knew there was no way could afford college on own. Needed help. So against better judgment, reached out to Mom. Remember sitting in grandparents' kitchen, late at night, holding phone, trying to figure out how to word text. Mind kept spinning with different ways to ask for help, without sounding too desperate. Deleted and rewrote message at least 10 times. Finally sent it. Hey, I've been accepted to a few colleges. Was wondering if you could help with financial aid stuff, or co-sign a loan. Hit send and immediately regretted it. Not because thought it was wrong to ask, but because deep down already knew answer. Still tiny stupid part of me held on to hope. Maybe she'd remember I was her kid too. Her reply came hours later. When it did, stomach dropped. We're saving for the twins' future. We can't help. Sorry. That was it. No congrats. No, we're proud of you. Just flat rejection. Shouldn't have surprised me. But it did. Or maybe just hurt more than wanted to admit. Stared at message. Trying to process how someone could shut their own kid down like that. Wasn't even about money. Was complete lack of care. Sat there feeling like idiot. Wondering why even bothered. Knew couldn't count on her. Put phone down. Trying to swallow lump in throat. But tears came anyway. Wasn't mad at twins. They didn't ask for this. But couldn't help feeling cast aside. Like didn't matter. Thankfully, Aunt stepped in. When told her what happened, she didn't even hesitate. Looked me straight in the eye and said, I'll co-sign your loans. You just focus on making this work, okay? She didn't have to do that. Had her own responsibilities, own kids to worry about, but she believed in me. Told me she always knew I had it in me to go far. Honestly, that belief hit harder than offer itself. At that moment, made promise to myself. Wouldn't let her down. Work my ass off. Not just for me, but to prove her faith in me wasn't misplaced. Mom might have slammed door shut, but Aunt flung it wide open. Wasn't about to waste chance. College was no joke. Hustled nonstop. Campus jobs, weekend shifts, side gigs just to keep myself afloat. Even taught myself web design. Started freelancing for small businesses. Work paid well. Had bills to cover. Sleep became luxury couldn't afford. But didn't care. Had a goal. Nothing was going to stop me. And Mom still radio silence? Not single text or call to check in. Every now and then stumble across her social media posts. Pictures of twins at their school plays, their birthdays, their family vacations to Disneyland. She looked so carefree, like her life was this perfect little bubble. Those posts felt like daggers straight to chest, so eventually blocked her. Couldn't keep torturing myself. By looking at life wasn't part of... When graduation finally rolled around, sent Aunt invite to ceremony. She didn't just come, was beaming in front row, cheering louder than anyone else. When my name was called, Mom. Didn't even bother asking her if she didn't care about my education, when needed her help most. She didn't deserve to be there, celebrating my success. My aunt, though, she deserved every bit of that moment. Because without her, Might not have made it at all. After graduation, real grind started. Moved to small city in Ohio for job in my field. Pay wasn't great, but enough to cover bills. Start chipping away at student loans. Those first few years were rough. Living in tiny apartment with crappy furniture, working long hours just to prove myself. Poured everything had into that job. Took every opportunity to learn. Stayed late to finish projects. Volunteered for tasks no one else wanted. Slowly but surely started paying off. Got promotion. Then another. Before knew it was moving up ladder. By time hit late 20s, finally in good place. Paid off big chunk of loans. Upgraded to decent apartment. Had some savings. For first time in life, felt like finally getting ahead. Relationship with mom, still non-existent. Didn't go out of way to contact her. She didn't either. Every now and then hear from relatives that she asked about me, but never led to anything. She had her family. I had my life. Think hardest part of those years was realizing she wasn't going to change. Some part of me had always hoped she'd reach out, apologize, or at least acknowledge how she treated me, but never happened. Instead, learned to stop expecting anything from her. Fast forward to age 30. Was in upper management, making more money than ever thought would. Kept it quiet though. Didn't post about it online. Didn't tell most of family. Didn't want to deal with drama. But aunt, one who co-signed loans, was only one who knew about promotion. She was proud of me. Told me so every time we talked, unfortunately at family gathering. She casually mentioned it to mom, thinking might spark reconciliation. She meant well, always been one trying to keep peace. But that one comment set off chain reaction wasn't ready for. Few days later, knock on door. Wasn't expecting anyone. Looked through peephole. Was mom and Robert. Hadn't seen them in years. Couldn't think of single good reason for them to be standing on doorstep. Opened door, but didn't step aside to let them in. What's going on? I asked. Robert didn't bother with pleasantries. We need to talk, he said. Shoving way past me. Like owned place, mom followed him in, without so much as hello. We heard about your promotion, Robert started. His tone sharp and matter-of-fact. So you're finally doing something with yourself. Good for you. About time, really. I stared at them. No congrats, no small talk after all these years, just straight to insults. Okay, I said slowly. Mom jumped in then. The twins are starting college soon. And we've hit a bit of rough patch financially. We figured since you're doing so well now, you could help out with their expenses. I just stood there, trying to process what's going on. After years of silence, after everything they'd put me through, they had nerve to show up at my door and demand money. Are you serious? I finally said. Why wouldn't we be? Robert shot back. You're making good money now, aren't you? Don't act like you can't afford it. You don't have kids. You don't have family to take care of. You've got the money. It's not about whether I can afford it, I said. Voice rising. It's about fact that you two have done absolutely nothing for me. And now you're standing here asking for handout. Like I owe you something. Mom rolled her eyes. Oh, here we go, she said. Throwing her hands up? You're going to play victim again. Poor you. We didn't coddle you enough. You've been holding on to this grudge for years? And for what? Look at you. You turned out fine. Yeah, because I worked my ass off, I snapped. With no help from either of you. Do you have any idea how hard it was? To get through college without co-signer? Without any financial support? I made it happen. But not because of you. In spite of you? Robert smirked. Oh, come on. Stop acting like you had it so rough. You've got good job now, don't you? Nice place to live. Maybe you should be thanking us. If we hadn't pushed you out, you wouldn't be where you are today. Thanking you? I said. Voice shaking with anger. You threw me out because I wasn't convenient anymore. You made it clear I didn't matter to you, and now you're here expecting me to swoop in and save day. For kids you actually cared about? No, absolutely not. Mom's tone turned icy. You're being selfish, she snapped. I raised you on my own. Worked my ass off to keep you alive, to give you everything you needed. And now look at you. You've got everything you need, and all we're asking for is little help. They're your siblings. You owe them that much. After everything I've done for you, wasn't just what she said, was how she said it. Like I should feel ashamed for not immediately bending over backward. For her and twins. I don't owe them anything, I shot back. And I definitely don't owe either of you. You made your choices, and I made mine. You decided I wasn't worth your time or money, and now you're expecting me to put my life on hold for them. That's not happening. Robert stepped closer, his face hard. You know what your problem is? You've always thought you were more important than you actually are. You think you're better than everyone else just because you made it out on your own? But let me tell you something. You didn't mean anything to this family then. And you don't mean anything now? That hit hard. but didn't let it show. Then why are you here? I said coldly. If I don't mean anything to you, why are you standing in my living room? Begging for money? Mom snapped. Because we didn't want to come here. Do you think we enjoy asking you for help? But twins deserve future. And if you weren't so goddamn selfish, you'd see that. But no. You're too busy playing wounded child to do anything for anyone but yourself. I laughed bitterly. You want to talk about being selfish? You threw your own kid out of house to make room for your real family. You told me I wasn't worth effort. And now you want to stand here and talk about what twins deserve? They deserve better parents. That's not my problem. Robert pointed finger at me, his voice rising. You better watch your mouth. We're still your family whether you like it or not. And family helps family. No, I said firmly. Family doesn't do what you did to me. Family doesn't throw their kid out like trash and then come crawling back when they need money. You're not my family. You're strangers to me. Mom's face twisted in anger. Fine, be selfish, little brat. But don't come crying to us. When your life falls apart, you think you're so much better than us. But you're nothing. You'll always be nothing. That was it? Had enough. If you don't leave right now, I said. Pulling out my phone. I'm calling police. Robert scoffed. Go ahead, call them. See how that looks? Throwing your own parents out of your house. You're not my parents, I said calmly. Finger hovering over screen. Not anymore. Mom grabbed his arm, muttering something under her breath. You're going to regret this, she said, as they turned to leave. No, I said. Shutting door behind them. I'm not... That was moment I realized just how much I'd changed. Kid who desperately wanted their approval was gone. I didn't owe them anything, wasn't going to let them guilt me into thinking otherwise. After they left, stood in living room, phone still in hand, just stood there. Wasn't upset, wasn't even angry anymore, was exhausted. For years carried this hope, very deep hope, that maybe one day they'd see me as their son, their family, as someone who mattered. But that hope was gone. That confrontation slammed door on any lingering illusions might have had about them. After that day thought I'd seen last of them, had made it clear they weren't welcome in my life, was ready to move on. But people like them don't take no for answer. They weren't done trying to claw their way back in. What followed was nothing short of chaos. Couple weeks later, found out from coworkers that mom had shown up at my office. I wasn't there, had taken sick day, but she apparently caused quite scene. She marched in, demanded to speak with me. When told I wasn't there, she refused to leave, was shouting about family and sacrifices, and how I owed her. One of my coworkers said, security had to escort her out. It was intense. Apologized to everyone, was mortified. Made sure to notify HR, told them to add her to list of people who weren't allowed on premises. Still was shaken. Couldn't believe she'd stooped that low. But worst was yet to come. Mom didn't back off. One evening about a week later, got home from work, found her waiting for me outside my house. She was pacing up and down driveway, clearly agitated. Moment I stepped out of car, she stormed over shouting, "You can't keep ignoring me," she yelled. Took deep breath. Keeping my distance? What are you doing here? We need to talk, she said, pointing finger at me like I was child. You think you can just walk away? From your family? From your responsibilities? What responsibilities? I shot back. Your parent, not me. Twins are your kids. You're one who's supposed to figure this out. Not me. That set her off. Started screaming about how I was selfish and ungrateful. How I owed her for everything she'd done for me. I sacrificed so much for you, she shouted. And this is how you repay me. By turning your back on us? You didn't sacrifice anything for me, I said. Trying to keep voice steady. Mom, go back to your home. That you kicked your son out of... and don't show up again. At that point, her voice changed. From loud to downright hysterical. Started yelling so loudly that neighbors came out of houses to see what was going on. He's a brat, she screamed, gesturing wildly at me. He's always been selfish little brat. He doesn't care about anyone but himself. Few neighbors tried to intervene, telling her to calm down, but she wasn't hearing it. Her voice grew louder, more frantic, until she lunged at me screaming, "After everything I've done for you!" Stay back, I warned. My phone in hand, as started dialing 911. I mean it, Mom. Don't you dare! Her face twisted in rage. Made wild grab for my phone. Don't you dare call police on your own mother. I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you. You abandoned me, I shouted back. Holding phone out of her reach, trying to keep her at bay. Didn't feel like arguing with mom anymore. Was like watching stranger wearing her face. She was screaming about ingratitude, about family loyalty, while lunging at me, still trying to grab phone from my hands. Through chaos, heard one of neighbors yelling, "I'm calling police. Leave him alone." More neighbors started emerging, standing on porches, or edging closer, watching this surreal scene of mother physically going after own child. Finally, someone stepped in, pulled her away from me, just as sound of sirens cut through air. She struggled against them, still screaming something incoherent. But moment was over, as flashing lights of police car, filled street, stood there shaking, realizing how far she'd gone and how much couldn't let her back into my life. Next morning, went straight to police station, filed report, explained everything. Workplace incident, her showing up at house, screaming match in front of neighbors. Officer I spoke to was sympathetic, helped me start process of getting restraining order. When told my grandparents what happened, they were furious. "She's lost her mind," my grandpa said, shaking his head. "I don't know what's wrong with her." "But you don't deserve this. We should have done more for you back then," my grandma added, her voice heavy with guilt. "We thought we were helping by staying close, but we let you face too much on your own." "I'm so sorry." Told them it wasn't their fault. They'd done best they could. They were only reason I'd had any kind of stability. After mom kicked me out, they made it clear they were done with her. "We've stood by her through everything," my grandpa said. "But this is last straw. We're cutting ties." Hearing that was bittersweet. On one hand, felt like validation. They finally saw her for who she was. But on other hand, hurt to know how far she'd fallen and how little she'd cared about anyone but herself. Restraining order was granted few weeks later. Life finally started to settle down. Poured myself into my career, my house, and people who truly mattered. My grandparents, my aunt, my close friends. My aunt, though, she was my rock. She didn't just step in when things got hard. She stayed. Never made me feel like I owed her anything for it. Few months later, after I'd finally caught my breath, decided to do something for her. Wasn't about repaying her. Was about showing her how much she meant to me. Didn't just hand her money. Planned it out. Made sure it was enough to cover weekend getaway for her and her family. Something she'd always dreamed about, but never prioritized. Because she was always putting others first. When gave her envelope, she looked confused at first, then opened it and gasped. "What is this?" she asked, her voice shaky. "It's for you," I said simply. "You've always been there for me." "You didn't have to, but you did. You deserve something good. Something just for you." Her eyes welled up. She shook her head. "You didn't have to do this. I didn't help you because I wanted anything in return." "I know," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "That's why you deserve it even more." She hugged me tight. For first time in years, felt kind of love and support I'd spent whole life chasing. She didn't just see me, she valued me. Meanwhile, every now and then, hear bits and pieces about Mom and Robert. Their financial situation was crumbling. Twins were barely making it through college. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel anything. They had made their choices, and I had made mine. For years had carried weight of wanting their approval, of hoping they'd finally see me as someone who mattered, but now understood. They never would, and that was okay. I didn't need their validation. I saw my own worth now, and I'd surrounded myself with people who did too. I've built life I'm proud of, filled with people who genuinely care about me. Most importantly, I've learned that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by ones who show up, who stand by you, who love you for who you are, not for what they can take from you. As for my mom, I hope she finds whatever she's looking for, but I'm done being her solution. I'm done being her sacrifice. My life is my own now, and I'm not looking back. If anything new pops up, I'll post update for you guys. Final update. Hey everyone, didn't think I'd be writing update, but something unexpected happened. Feel like it's worth sharing. After everything that went down with Mom and Robert, restraining order, ambush outside my house, her meltdown, thought I was done with that part of my life, closed door and moved on. But then one of twins reached out, started with text from unknown number. "Hey, it's Daniel. Can we talk? I'd like to get to know you. You're my brother, and I don't know you at all." Sat there staring at message for a long time. Daniel and I barely knew each other. After I left home all those years ago, twins were little kids at time, and after everything Mom and Robert put me through, had no connection with them. Part of me wondered if this was some new ploy by Mom. But way Daniel worded his message felt different. After a while I replied, "What's this about?" Few minutes later he called, hesitated before picking up. "Hey," he said, voice little nervous. "I know this is random, but I wanted to reach out. I've been thinking about you a lot lately, and I feel like I missed out on something important. You're my brother, and I don't know anything about you. I hate that. I didn't say much, so he kept going. I know what Mom and Dad did to you, he said. I didn't understand it when I was kid. But I do now. I don't think it was right. Honestly, I think it was horrible. And I don't blame you for walking away. But I hate that their choices kept us from having relationship. That's on them, not you. His words caught me off guard. Didn't expect him to be so honest about situation. Daniel, none of this was your fault, I said, trying to keep voice steady. You didn't make choices they made. I know, he said. But it doesn't make it any easier. I feel like I've missed out on having older brother, and now that I'm old enough to understand everything, I want to at least try to fix that. I know I can't undo what they did, but I'd like to get to know you, if you're open to it. Leaned back in my chair, unsure what to say. For years carried weight of feeling like didn't matter to my family, but here was Daniel, reaching out, acknowledging what happened, asking for chance to build something different. Why now? I asked. Why reach out after all this time? Honestly, he said, because I don't want us to be strangers forever. I'm not asking you to forgive Mom or Dad, and I'm not trying to make excuses for them. I want to know you. That's it. His tone was so genuine. Hard not to feel a little moved. I've spent long time trying to move on from all this, I said finally. It's not easy for me to open that door again. I get that, he said. And I'm not asking for anything big. I just want chance to talk to you. Maybe see if we can have some kind of relationship. You're my brother, and I'd like to know who you are. Sat there for a moment, weighing options. Twins weren't responsible for what happened. They didn't make decisions that tore our family apart. And if Daniel was making effort to reach out, maybe it was worth meeting him halfway. Even though part of me kept saying, maybe his only intention is take advantage of me. Decided to give him chance anyway, since didn't really know twins yet. All right, I said. We can start with conversation. His relief was obvious. Thank you, he said quickly. That's all I'm asking. I just want to start somewhere. We ended call shortly after. Spent rest of evening thinking about it. Daniel reaching out wasn't something ever expected. Left me with mix of emotions. Couldn't fully process. Truth is, had spent so long seeing twins as part of family that cast me aside. But Daniel made me realize they were as much victims of Mom and Robert's selfishness as I was. They didn't choose this, any more than I did. Not sure where this will go. I'm still cautious. Built life for myself that I'm proud of. Not eager to reopen old wounds, but at the same time, Daniel's effort feels genuine. He didn't try to guilt me or make excuses for his parents. He just wanted to know me, and for first time, feel like maybe, just maybe, could have relationship. With someone from that side of family, it's small step, but feels like progress. My face when family drama never really ends.